Hello my viewers, today I'm going to be making a how-to guide for how to play as Guangdong in TNO. Alright, so just a heads up before we continue with the video, there might be some spoilers for the story up ahead. So for example, when it comes with the oil crisis, there's some key decisions that decide the factor what ending you will get. But don't worry, because I'm going to be mentioning all about that and the decisions that you'll need to take to get those endings. But before we get to that scenario later on in the video, I want to talk about the mechanics first. Like for example, manufacturing different products from different companies, then proxy wars, and decisions that can boost your research in certain products. As soon as you load up the game, you'll have the options go into your decisions tab, which will allow you to select easy or hard mode, but for the context of this video, we won't be using that. However, if you decide on clicking on those options, then it will give you even more options which will grant you buffs or debuffs depending on your choosing. Now, as for the next part of this video, we are going to be discussing about the mechanics of Guangdong. So, when you go down your first focus tree, you'll get new UI decisions that will help you to manage your country. So the first thing we'll go over is the three evils. As for what they are basically your relations and your corruption meter, with the left one being for China and the right one being for Japan, with the center bar indicating corruption. It's important to keep the corruption bar down as low as you can, because throughout the playthrough, if it keeps getting higher and higher, then it will negatively affect your nation by giving you debuffs along the way. However, if you want to counter corruption by bringing it down, what you can spend political power to lower the meter down, and the lower it is, the more buffs you'll get, like giving you extra political power. Also, one thing to point out is that the same can be said for the relation meters, because you want to keep them as high as you can, because they will give you benefits like growing your economy, which is crucial if you want to meet the quota. Now, the second mechanic we're looking over is the state of Guangdong. As you can see, unlike the last mechanic we looked over, there's a relation meter. However, unlike the last one, which tells you if the Chinese or Japanese government supports you, this one on the other hand tells you if the people support you instead. This also means you should keep relations high so you can receive benefits. Another thing to point out is the states and the factions that control them, which are the police, the Yakuza, the traders, and finally, the Kempentai. Depending on which faction controls either state, what will happen is that they will generate good relations with the locals. For example, if the traders have control of one of the states, then they help to increase Chinese support for the government. Another example could be if the Yakuza have control over one of the states, then it will increase Japanese support. And if police have control over one of the states, which you can see right here, then it will increase support for these guys. Finally, as for the Kempentai, I recommend not having them because they produce barely any support from the people, and not only that, but they produce way too much corruption. If you want to empower a certain faction that you want, then simply click on their icon, which is right there. Then after you pick the state first, you'll have the option to spend political power or money, which will raise a number in the right hand corner, which if it's high enough, then the faction you want will take over the area. In my personal opinion, the two best factions are the police, because not only do they decrease corruption, but however, if there's enough of them controlling the area, then they give you a bonus that increases relations with everyone. And finally, the second best faction in my opinion is the triads. Now you're probably wondering, why them, don't they still give you corruption? And why yes, they do. However, if you play as Sony, you have the option to legalize casinos, which if you do, it will make the triads produce zero corruption, so they will only boost Chinese relations. As for the early parts of the game, you'll see your first focus tree. Then, after completing one of the focuses, you'll be granted a new UI decision which will allow you to invest into unique company products of your choosing. And every time that these minor products are produced, so for example, let's say if you pick TVs for example, that means that every Sony product that you do, you'll be granted extra money. Now, after going over research and development, we are now going to be moving to the production cycle. Now, once every year you'll be given 3 options. And out of these 3 options, you can pick one main product to support development. After selecting it, you can see in the tab that there's a production quality and production interest, which you need to spend political power and relations with citizens to boost the interest and quality of the product. And just below that you can see that you can pick which market to access to sell your product. But however, just to be warned, if you keep selling in the same market over and over again except for China and Japan, you'll lose money, so make sure that when you sell a different product you sell into a different market. As for this UI right here, all I can say that it functions like a quota mechanic. This means that your country's GDP needs to be at a certain point before a certain date. Also, there's no need to worry, because if you don't make it to quota, nothing bad will happen. But however, if you do make it quota, then it will help boost relations with not only the Japanese government, but also amongst your citizens. Also, a fun fact that if you beat Manchuria by having a higher GDP than them, then you actually get an achievement for doing so. And finally, we have the product testing group. And what I mean by that is that when a proxy war appears, you will be given a special division that you can send to fight in these wars to conduct combat testing. This is important because you'll have objectives to complete, like attacking with battle plans, fighting in certain environments, or attacking across rivers. As more of these objectives are complete, the more money you can make, as well as the increase in Japanese government relations. Moving on, we are going to be looking at how to get the company you want in charge. Now, during the financial crisis, you need to pick a new company that will be in charge of Guangdong. With that, a new focus tree will appear, where you will need to pick focuses that will support Sony or... Okay, well I ain't gonna try and pronounce it because I'll probably butcher it, but if you're wondering which company I'm talking about these guys over here. So by picking these focuses, you can see how much in the successor UI, this will tell which company is most likely to take charge. Also, if you want Mitsubishi to take power, then simply you just need to balance out the focuses that back either Sony or the other company I was talking about. Lastly, if you want Hitachi in power, I must warn you because this is spoilers, so you have been warned. So finally, to get Hitachi into power, you need to win in the coup attempt, so that happens roughly midway into your game. And by having a certain amount of numbers of seats in the executive body, you'll be able to take over whoever's in charge. Okay, if you got to this part of the video, I can only assume that things went from bad to worse in such a short amount of time that now the Japanese army wants to coup you, your people are protesting en masse, your country's tearing itself apart, and finally your economy's in freefall. So, not really a good situation. But don't worry, looky here, I will be able to help you out by giving you a quick guide on how to solve the oil crisis. Now, during the oil crisis, when riots start to take over Guangdong, what you need to do to fix that, you need to make sure that when you go into your state UI, you need to make sure that the police has more control over than the rioters. Now, while it may not fix the issue of the riots, it will definitely help to slow them down just a bit. By the way, an important thing to note out is that you can't let Japanese frustration get to 100%, because if it does, then what will happen is that the Japanese army will coup you and you'll get the failed stay ending. However, in the Rights Decision tab, there's decisions that you can take if you spend enough political power that will actually decrease Japanese frustration a bit. But however, just a quick warning that you can only take it so many times before you're not allowed to take it anymore. As for ways to end the riots, you have two options: either negotiate with them or you can try and dismantle the organisations. And I recommend dismantling them as long as you make sure to save many times. And the reason why dismantling them is easier is because that all you need to do is just click key decisions that pop up every now and then, and in those decisions you need to find 3 clues, and after finding 3 clues, the organisation will be dismantled, and after doing that you just need a repeat for the other one. And after the 2 organisations are finally dismantled, the oil crisis should come to an end. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about the playthrough, make sure to put it in the comments below.